Is it me, or does making a decent meal for yourself feel more complicated than it should be? Going online, you see lots of jaw dropping, mouth-watering recipes that sometimes have expensive and hard to source ingredients with hours of prep time, several dirty dishes, and gadgets, half of which you might not even own. So it's important to ask, why do we cook at home anyway? And if that really aligns with the recipes we choose? Well, there's social reasons like impressing your partner's family at Thanksgiving, practical reasons like eating something healthy in a timely and monetarily efficient manner, or even just as a creative outlet. I'd wager, however, that most of the time cooking is done because food needs to be put on the table. With that in mind, celebrity chefs like Gordon Ramsay, Jamie Oliver, and etc. have vastly different goals when it comes to cooking, often doing so in front of cameras and in restaurant kitchens, meaning their purpose is often professionally or artistically motivated. With recipes intended for home cooks often prioritizing spectacle over viability, because that's how you retain an audience. There might also be the underlying assumption that their viewers are already familiar with the basic fundamentals of cooking and have a prerequisite knowledge to put those recipes to good use. This is not to say there aren't celebrity chefs out there who specialize in home cooking or that the wisdom and advice they do offer is useless. After all, these are people with a formal education, general mastery of, and complex understanding of the art. Epitomes of the culinary world. Now, of course, we can't forget about all of the cooking influencers out there who have similar goals to ours in a lot of ways, a lot of which base their careers on their origins as a home cook. The content can vary from person to person, often with different levels of practicality and spectacle similar to the aforementioned celebrity chefs. Some of the best cooking advice I've ever received came from these people. Here's a graph of some well-known channels that I've placed arbitrarily. Life of Boris makes it on this list for his end-of-month series detailing impressively bare-bones, budget-friendly cooking tutorials. On the opposite end of the spectrum is How to Basic, whose content exists purely for entertainment, and it could arguably be considered performative art in a way. Although I use the term performative art loosely. Alright, enough talking about what goes on in the kitchen. A lot of what goes on is thanks mostly in part to the grocery store. There's often this culture of fear and anxiety that seems to be ever present with food in general, with a million different pieces of terrible advice often based on misconceptions and misinformation. Take, for example, only eat ingredients you can pronounce. This advice and others like it stem from chemophobia, or an irrational fear of chemicals, often advocating for a more natural diet. Let's take a look at all the natural ingredients found in a peach. Most of you probably stopped around octadecadenoic acid. I know I did. This isn't to prove that no chemicals are bad. After all, it took 40 years for us to realize that thorium shouldn't go in toothpaste. But just because an ingredient is hard to pronounce or derived synthetically doesn't automatically make it unsafe for human consumption. More accurate advice would be avoiding heavily processed foods, but it's no secret that month-old Hostess donuts that supernaturally stays edible despite being coated in sugars and fats will cause serious health issues if eaten regularly. There tends to be an aversion to frozen foods based on the presumption that it's inherently inferior to the fresh stuff. However, modern freezing technology is so advanced that the cellular damage attributed to the lowering quality of the food is so negligible that it's often imperceptible. So I highly encourage you to consider picking up a bag of frozen veggies to keep in the back of your freezer, as they'll last way longer and require way less prep time without compromising quality. It gets so much easier to regularly eat healthy food when you make it more accessible for yourself. Some meals can be as easy as dumping a frozen medley into a bowl with some butter and nuking it in the microwave. With fish and other seafood, frozen is actually a boon for quality, because never frozen food advances further in the decomposition process by the time it reaches store shelves, and because seafood spoils so rapidly, it can often lead to the very compromises in quality you seek to avoid. Alright, I don't have time to truly go in depth on everything, so it's time for a bit of a lightning round. Pasture raised is the only one that's really ethical. Seed oils aren't bad for you, but they are in a lot of unhealthy foods. MSG isn't actually harmful to most people, and it was an idea rooted in xenophobia. Expiry dates are merely suggestions. A lot of food remains edible well after its expiration date if stored properly, so use your own judgment. Weight loss always involves some form of eating less and moving more. There's no magic pill or technique that will change that. Artificial sweeteners aren't carcinogenic, but they also aren't harmless. Detox diets are a complete myth. Raw milk will kill you. Pasteurized milk is just as nutritious. Organic isn't any healthier than GMO, but there are legitimate environmental concerns regarding GMOs. Finally, don't take advice from someone trying to sell you supplements. I hope you walk away from this video with a little less afraid of your kitchen or a little more excited to cook. The one and only secret to being a great home cook is knowing why you cook.